Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Thursday's edition, and we're happy to be broadcasting from Southern California after a nice flight East Coast to West Coast yesterday. Beautiful Irvine, California. Jeffrey, welcome back to Schaftlein Report. Happy to be seeing you coming from Long Island, New York.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it is good to
the home of Santos.
Yeah, you are at the home of Santa. We'll get to that later in the show. But Jeffrey, it's great being back in studio seeing you. You know, it was 84 when I left Delray yesterday. It was 50 when I landed in Southern California. So we're happy to be back in studio, and we've got a lot to cover today.
Oh, well, it's Thursday. There's always more news when I'm on the show.
It just seems like it is, whether it's international, domestic, we'll get to all of it. But hey, let's talk about some economics first of all. The Federal Reserve yesterday increased their federal funds rate 25 basis points. And as a result of that, NASDAQ stocks have been skyrocketing, up 3% yesterday, up another 3% today, up over 15% year to date. Year to date, and we're a couple days into February now, an interesting thing is happening. While the Fed has raised its rate, as did other central banks, mortgage rates and government bonds are coming down. Jeffrey, I'm from the old school of economics.
The housing market was down. I think it's starting to come up again, but it was way down. So mortgage rates are dropping because people weren't buying houses.
Well, I think what the market is implying is that they really believe the Fed will be lowering interest rates later this year. Jerome Powell, in his talk yesterday, said he is seeing some signs of disinflation. God, I hope so, because we still have 5% inflation year over year. But Jeffrey, Americans are still feeling the pinch of these higher prices. And while Wall Street is celebrating, like no tomorrow, I mean, literally, the NASDAQ stock market jumping 6%. Meta stock, the old Facebook, up 25% in one day today. It's astounding. It's like the market is saying the Fed will not be increasing rates more, even though the Fed has said one or two more rates are likely. The market is saying the Fed will be cutting by the end of the year, and yet we have unemployment running at 3.5% right now. So, Jeffrey, I don't know. It seems to me like
cuts. I'm going to grow a head full of hair. Okay. What they're not realizing is, yes, sales might be stagnant or even a little higher, but the number of units being sold is down because of inflation.
That's in the real estate market. Yes. Real estate's taking its hits, as some other industries. But the market is saying, wait a second, this is going to be a small recession. He'll have to cut rates. And their market is basically saying we may not even. Powell said yesterday he may be able to accomplish this without there even being a recession. I have my doubts.
I read something, actually wrote about it a couple of days ago, saying that food is about to spike up because, believe it or not, the worldwide fertilizer market has disappeared. And if you don't have fertilizer, you can't make crops.
Yeah,
that's going to drive the price of food up, or some food up.
It wouldn't shock me to see a continual rise in food prices, energy prices turning around. Look, wage inflation is still out there. I don't know. Again, the bond market is generally ahead, but right now the Fed and the gap between what the Fed says interest rates will be and where the market is pricing it is huge. It's like 50 to 75 basis point spread. So for real Americans, the effects that this is having on them, you would have thought the Fed raising rates, mortgage rates might tick up. No, they tick down. Actually, you can get a mortgage today in the 5s, less than 6%. And the stock market is hitting highs not seen in 5 months today. The Dow's down a little bit. The NASDAQ's up again, 3%. The S&P's up again today. So
it still has only made up half the gains that it lost last year.
That's a huge makeup, though. All those gains, what was lost last year has been made up this year in literally 33 days. So say what you want, and there's a lot of people that doubt it are saying, oh, fear of missing out. They're having to buy, short sellers buying. But you've got a clear bull stampede going on in the marketplace right now, and I'm not sure that's what the Fed expected. But again, the Fed, they've got unemployment at 3.5%. Inflation's still running 5%. Some pieces of it are coming down, but we don't need 5% inflation in this country. And the Powell is going to try to get it down to 2%. So I don't know, Jeffrey. Inflation's high. Could we see disinflation, as Powell mentioned? Yeah, you certainly could.
It depends. I mean, food isn't close to that.
Right.
And you know what? To most people in this country, that's the thing that's got to go down.
Agreed. Yep.
And that's not happening. It's going up.
No, it
Still.
is. It's continuing to go up. Gasoline is moderated considerably. Housing costs, rents aren't going down. They're not going up as fast. And in some cases, real estate prices have come down and come down by a considerable amount. And there's not as many sales going on. Sales are considerably down too. So certain segments of the market, are the Fed is accomplishing its goals. Other pieces, it's not. Their next meeting is not until March. So, apparently the market has some ways to run based upon the reaction to it so far. We'll see if that continues to play itself out.
And when Biden does his bragging, not one in the news asks him about it. When he says that, gas prices are way down, no one in the news says, hey, wait, what does that compare to before you came to office?
Right.
So no one asks the really hard. All they keep asking is the same questions about the documents that he's not going to answer. It almost sounds like, remember the movie Rain Man?
Yeah, sure.
It's their version of 10 Minutes to Wapner.
Well, it's interesting with all this economic news coming out, the Biden administration on the day this happens comes out, they're attacking banks for charging too much on credit card late fees. Basically saying they're going to try to push through a rule and regulation that would, cap it at a smaller amount. Look, for all that effort, there will be a lot of litigation involved in that. It would, at the earliest, sometime mid to late 2024. But again, one thing that's sort of under the hood that is creating some problems, two things I'll mention. Credit card balances are skyrocketing. And for a lot of people, they don't pay that credit card off every month. They're paying high interest rates on it. And God forbid they miss a payment, they're going to be paying north of 20% on those. You can't, that will bury someone. So in addition to that, we've seen close to 3% of Americans pulling money out of their 401ks for emergency spending. You can do that if you have an emergency. So I don't know. It seems like we really have a mixed bag here.
Let me ask you something. They're thinking about regulating late fees. When was the last time you saw the government regulate prices for anything that didn't screw up the economy?
It always screws things up when the government tries to regulate things. Absolutely.
Yeah, I still remember when Nixon tried to do it.
Yeah, no, it's not a good thing. But again, the earliest that could happen would be 2024, midterm. Lots of obstacles in the way of that. And like a lot of other initiatives out of this, people look at Biden as the White House. Well, in actuality, Biden is a fairly moderate Democrat compared to some of these staffers that put out this stuff in the White House. These are far left-wing radicals in his White House. Let me move on to something you just talked about, okay? McCarthy met with Biden yesterday and, came away, faced the reporters, and basically said that he thought they could reach some common ground. Then what does the White House put out after McCarthy leaves? There will be no negotiation. These people in the White House are hard leftist radicals. So, and a lot of the media, obviously you can see that starting. Well, there's no need to negotiate. A lot of the debt was rung up under Trump, which is true. Trump did a lot of the debt came up under him. And things were pointed out, well, hey, Republicans always allowed Trump to increase the debt. He was the king of debt. Well, now that debt is still around. So McCarthy, I think one thing's going to happen, Jeffrey, and this is something Biden's sort of calling him out on. He's saying, okay, you tell me you want to have some cuts, show me a budget. I'll be honest with you, doesn't seem like an unreasonable request.
And when has Biden shown anybody a budget?
He hasn't. They haven't.
Right.
It's not only Biden, it was Trump too. Congress doesn't even pass the 14 spending bills. They always roll it into that ominous spending bill. But, again, this is going to play itself out. The government sometime in May or June will cap out. So there has to be some type of resolution worked out prior to then. We'll see.
I would like Biden to say, here, next week I'm going to sit down with my budget. You're going to sit down with your budget. We're going to see where we can, compromise. That would be the right thing.
Well, of course
Not
it would.
show me your budget.
Of course.
Let's sit down with each one of us and work out a solution.
Well, typically, the White House would put out its budget. Congress would announce it dead on arrival. Congress would write its budget. It would go, to the Senate. There'd be back and forth, and eventually they would agree on 14 spending bills. They don't do that anymore. Now they just do continuing resolutions and ominous spending bills, and I think that's going to stop with this Republican House. So
I hope so.
Yeah. So we'll see. All right, let's get into what I call some social issues, some other stuff, the things going on. What do you make of this DirecTV thing where they're trying to basically censor Newsmax? A lot of Republican lawmakers are ticked off about this, and rightly they should be.
Let me tell you what I hear. I hear it's just a battle of carrier fees. Has nothing to do with censorship. They replaced it with a network that has Bill O'Reilly and other conservatives.
Okay, so
explain
it's not
that. Conservative.
Explain that to our audience, the fee thing, because you've been in that.
When a cable company does a channel, they have to pay that channel X dollars per subscriber.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it works. Okay, so First TV, which is a new conservative network, Newsmax raised their fees per subscriber too high, and the cable and the satellite network said, you know what, that's too high. Let's negotiate, and it didn't want to negotiate past the rate, so they said, you know what,
goodbye.
We're gone.
So it was more of a so you're telling me it was more of a business decision than a philosophical, politically motivated decision.
It's not a Bill O'Reilly. It's Dana Lash, who's a friend of mine and very conservative. I mean, they're replacing it with a network of conservatives.
Okay, I see. That's what it is. So again, this only assumes you have an AT&T cable system. So where you used to get Newsmax, now you won't get it. You're going to get some other conservative group. And Newsmax was basically saying to AT&T, here's the fees we want. We're not willing to negotiate. AT&T said, no, we're not willing to pay, and that's that. That's
it.
That's your take on it. Okay, that explains something. So, then if that's the case, then aren't some of these representatives and senators, don't they know this? Because they're out there lambasting AT&T, and what, if you're correct, says is like a business decision.
Well, and that's what Newsmax is saying too. Mm-hmm. They're censoring us.
Yeah,
censoring. It's you want too much money, they don't want to pay it.
You won't hear that in the mainstream media.
But that's how business works.
Yeah. Because you've been in that side of it. I'm well aware of that. And adding to these culture wars, did you catch that story about some college student went into the Smithsonian with some I Support Life hat wearing? They kicked the guy out.
Yeah, that's disgusting. I have to tell you. And the sad thing is, if he walked in with a hat that said Black Lives Matter,
you took the words out of my mouth. Not a word would have been said. Right.
No.
It's that double standard, what's going on. Smithsonian is a government building. I didn't think the government could discriminate.
Government does it all the time.
Yeah, I know. They're not supposed to. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, okay, well, they just awarded an African-American woman $1 million because some gas station wouldn't serve her. How about this student suing the Smithsonian, see what he could get by being kicked out by wearing a hat? I mean, look, it's just flat out wrong.
Politicians I'd like to put on one of those planes in the Air and Space Museum, which is one of my favorites.
Well, it should not have happened. That's the point. You and I both agree on that.
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah, never should have happened. All right, let's talk about something that you and I have talked about really, since the inception of our show, going back a few years. The Republicans appear finally on the verge of impeaching Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkis. This guy is basically not done his job. He's loathed by the Border Patrol agents. I mean, Jeffrey, this guy, there has been more flooding of illegals into this country with Mayorkis at the helm than I can ever remember. We're still getting 200,000 a month coming through that southern border.
Mark, I agree with your feelings, but it's a waste of time.
All right, explain why it's a waste of time.
The the Republicans in the House may get through articles of impeachment,
Right.
but the Senate has to agree to it. The Senate is the jury.
I know.
Last time I checked, the Senate is Democratic.
I know. I'm aware of that. But I think they're going to go through with that. They'll go through with it. He won't be convicted, but they want to go on record and get this border issue out in the public. And they promised their constituents they would go after this guy. And you're on the right page, okay? Which is why, Mayorkis is a pretty easy target here because it's real clear and obvious. But you're right. If it ever gets over to the Senate, they're not going to convict him. So I don't know that goes anywhere.
That's why he said the same thing about Trump when they went after him. I kept saying, "Well, do you really think a Republican Senate is going to get him out of office?"
Well, it didn't happen, did it?
Of course not.
No, it didn't happen. On both impeachments. The second one looked like it could have, but it didn't. All right. A pet peeve of yours, I want to let you take the lead on this. Tell our audience what happened with Representative Ilhan Omar today.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm really happy because I've been writing about her for years. Ilhan Omar, by the way, was kicked off of one committee. So people are saying, well, it's revenge because of what we did to Rep. Green. No, she was kicked off of all the committees. Omar was kicked off of one committee. She could serve on as many committees as we want, just not the Foreign Relations Committee. And why? Because she happens to be anti-Semitic.
Right.
Okay? There's no difference between anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. Okay? I can go on with that for hours, but I'm not going to. So what when she says she's doing anti-Israel, she's on the committee that makes recommendations about foreign relations. One of them is Israel. If she's biased against Israel, why should she be on the committee? It's as simple as that. That's why they're throwing her out.
Yeah. Well, she deserves to be thrown out. I mean, we don't need anti-Semites sitting on that committee. Omar has been that way, for years. It's amazing to me she won re-election. She won barely, but the people in her district, they sent her back.
Just in a couple of months' time, she accused the AIPAC of paying off Congress to be supporter of Israel, and she said that Jews have a dual commitment to Israel and the United States, which is stupid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Republicans had said if they elected. If they're given the majority, they would take her off those committees.
And a lot of Democrats supported what she said, not necessarily agreed with it, but said, "Oh, leave her alone," including Nadler.
Yeah.
Well, Nadler has been a little off anyway because since the time that he went to McDonald's and got stuck between the golden arches and had to be lured out with a Twinkie.
Well, along the lines of scandals, the Hunter Biden's attorneys are now saying that is his laptop, and they're calling for investigations into how all the stuff leaked out. It's just eventually this thing will come about because this Hunter Biden thing with these Burisma and the foreign governments, Ukraine, the banks, this guy is a walking time bomb. And at a certain point, it always had. Now, the Justice Department, the FBI, they're doing everything to conceal this stuff. But eventually, I'm hoping that the facts come out, as Joe Friday used to say, and we get to the bottom of what's going on here. Because
I would like every congressman and senator who said this is Russian disinformation to be interviewed and asked, still they think that way?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you push it to its logical conclusion, we're not going down that path yet. Obviously, the implication of they're not interested in Hunter. They're interested in following the money. Where did the money come from? Whose bank account did it go through? And did it end up in Joe Biden's?
Well, we know it's the big guy because he'll make you an offer he won't remember.
Well,
Still,
there's a lot of stuff.
Somebody's getting all this money from China.
Well, and money from Ukraine. A banker who was very friendly, started to talk. I can't remember his name, but this stuff will eventually come out. I think it will. And, Biden is sort of slate to announce his candidacy for re-election. He's sitting, Jeffrey, at a 44% approval rating right now. Actually, that's higher than he was at the end of the year by about 2 points. He was at 42 at the end of the year. So he's sitting at 44. I mean, that doesn't bode well, but it's certainly not the disastrous numbers when he was sitting here, 39, 40%. He's up considerably since then.
It all depends who the Republicans put up.
Yeah, of course it does. Speaking of who they're put up, Nikki Haley's preparing that she's going to be the first person to announce serious opposition to former President Trump. What do you make of Nikki Haley's pending announcement?
Well, supposedly Trump gave his blessing. Well, not his blessing, but he said, if you really feel that way that you should run, go ahead and run. Mm-hmm. Because he doesn't think she can win.
No, he doesn't. No,
Okay. But he's beaten up on DeSantis.
He perceives DeSantis as primary rival. And
but that's Trump. It's divisive, and he loves being divisive. But that's the problem. That's why he lost in 2020. Not because of his policies. They were great.
Yeah.
But because he was divisive.
Well, it was interesting. Larry Hogan, who is no Donald Trump fan at all, came out today and said, look, if Trump's the nominee, I'll support him. I think a lot of Republicans are in that boat. But a lot of people want to see a wide open campaign and see if the DeSantises, the Haleys, Pompeos, maybe Sununu, maybe Glenn Youngkin, who knows? We'll see how it comes out. But Haley is going to put her hat into the ring. She will be a formidable opponent. She's been around the block. She was an effective governor, served as ambassador. She has previously sat on Boeing's board of directors. I mean, she is.
I'm not familiar with her policies as governor, so I don't know that part. All I can tell you in terms of foreign policies, she's got the chops.
Yeah, she certainly does. And, let me not forget another Republican. Tim Scott's name is getting thrown about. And
Tim Scott.
Tim Scott's a well-respected one. So we're going to have as you and I have talked about, we're going to have a deep bench. I think it's going to go on for a while. I think it will be positive. Look, if the Democrats only nominate Biden and there's nobody else and they run the Rose Garden strategy, I don't know, Jeffrey. I mean,
well, how's the White House basement? Is it as nice as your basement?
No, they ran the Delaware basement strategy. This will clearly be a Rose Garden strategy.
I just hope that this campaign, at least among the Republicans, doesn't talk about what size hand someone has.
No. We can't have that. All right, about a minute to go. Okay, so where do you see things going from here?
I think a lot of things are really dependent on the economy, and I've heard both sides. I happen to believe the economy isn't as down as it's going to be. So I think by fourth quarter, we're going to be in trouble again.
Are you looking for a soft landing, small recession, hard recession?
It's going to be a crash.
But, you think it's going to be a crash?
Well, not like 1929, but I think it's not going to be soft. The other thing is, no one's ever explained to me the difference between a recession and a depression. To me, they're both the same, only it's semantics. But yeah, I think it's going to be tough. I think that business is starting to fire people, including the NASDAQ places. I think that unit sales are down, but prices are up. And of course, the government is going to mention that. And I think that things are going to get tougher. Gas prices have started to drift up a little again. They were $3.40 at the beginning of the summer. or at the end of the summer last year. Now they're close to 360, which isn't a lot, but
Right.
it's going the wrong way. So I also think that next week there are going to be a lot of great commercials on for the Super Bowl. It's the only reason why I watch it.
Who's your early pick?
I don't know, because the Eagles have a really good team, but Kansas City has a really good quarterback.
Yeah. Eagles are 2-point favorites right now. We'll talk about that next week. I want to talk about one thing you said a minute ago. Look, the classic definition of recession is 2 consecutive economic quarters of negative growth. There's other people that have other slightly different variations of that. A depression is generally a 10% decline in overall activity. So that's why it's very rare we see those. But
I thought a recession is when a depression is when recession is when your neighbor's out of work.
A depression is when you're out of work. Yeah, right, exactly. Look, I'm not sure we're heading there. Again, I've said this on other shows. I've never seen us go into recession with a 3.5% unemployment rate. Now, if all these layoffs start to snowball beyond the tech sector, because it's predominantly in technology, then we'll see. But it's like 1.9 job openings for every one person that needs a job. So
you got to see what happens at Christmas.
Yeah.
Well, their unit sales, but the travel industry and things like that.
Well,
so it's a lot of industries that can be affected by bad business.
Sure, no question about it. But like always, you and I, and all of our other guests at Schaftlein Report will stay on top of this, and we'll give the American public an unfiltered, objective analysis of it. Jeffrey, thank you again. It's great to have you back on a Thursday.
Great to be back.
And I will look forward to seeing you next week.
Me too. Take care, Mark.
Okay, folks, that's it for today. Great, everybody have a great weekend. We'll obviously stay on top of all these stories. Be back on Tuesday. See you then. Thanks for viewing and listening.